let's start with a very quick review. The core tone that originally kicked off this instrument, G. Taking the three harmonics in G, the three primary, we replace those harmonics with, or accentuate, the two strings around the G. And there we had all the, she'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. Of course, nobody back then thought to go, no, they didn't think of that. But it's a core sound, this G form. And then what happened was that with these additional bass notes to the traditional stringed instruments, which were all 3- and 4-note chords, because again, you have the full chord right here. Root, 5, and 3. So even this is actually an additional note, a baritone or bass note, however you want to call it. So with adding these two bottom strings at first, it was still the G things, like the 1, 2, 3, because the bottom strings were primarily tuned for a G chord, an open G chord. So you're going. But then when the E tuning became the primary tuning, or I should say it happened partially because when you put the E on the bass, all the things you were physically doing and you were taught all that time in the G happy form, you like, all of a sudden it has a blues sound. Because that dominant lower tone, which as a human being we take to be dominant if it's lower, and since it's first to be played usually, it's dominant. All of a sudden the same things you were doing in G sound like. So that changed everything. So let's get right down to it. Instead of memorizing hundreds and hundreds of chords and dots and forms and whatever, how about having the core, inner, and ear-trained understanding that there's only 3 chordal sounds that dominate everything. And even the bigger chords are just built on those. And it's just like electricity. It's just like writing stories. It's like anything in life because it's an absolute truth. You have happy. You have sad. And you have the blues. It doesn't matter if it happens, let's say, up here in New Jersey. It's still a blues. In Italy, I'm just being silly here, but, that's the sound. So you know the sound, you know how it's made, you know everything about it. Then you don't have to, memorize forms. You create the forms as you go along, by pivoting from every note to any note. So anyway, out of these 3, again, we have happy, which is primarily used in a 3-2-1, which is 3 blind mice. Three blind mice. Oh, I did it in the E form there. And then there's sad, which is primarily most of the songs, like all those rap tunes and everything, even if they do harmonic variations in the minor, it's still basically yo heave ho, heave ho, yo heave ho. Okay, and then the blues. Now, this was a sound that we moved on from because it's got that tritone. Stay tuned for the next installment, which is in the 7th chord. And rather than moving on like we normally do, like we go 4, and then on the 5 is where you find the 7th. Thank you, folks. Good night now. Thank you. You just feel it lingering in the air. Something's got to happen. You want to hear it. So the 7th always leads somewhere, and usually it's back to the 1 99% of the time. However, in How Dry I Am and in the blues, everything just continually has that causal feeling over it. And then once you're in this world of 7th, you go happy, sad, happy, sad. Just like in a story. You start out with tension, you know, that's the dominant 7th structure. You know, you start out with kind of a time frame, maybe like the 12 months of the 12-bar blues. And then you go back and forth, happy, sad, or it's going to be primarily sad, or at the end it gets happy, or you think it's going to be happy. It's exactly like that. It's exactly like telling a little story. You're telling a little story, little puzzles. And it feels good to do it, really. It really does. I mean, it feels good to play a common tone that you didn't intend, and all of a sudden, wow, it sounds like I meant to do it. But it's even more fun to get to the level where you're intentionally doing it as well. So within this How Dry I Am, I'm just laughing because everything on the guitar really seems to go back to the Civil War, and I grew up in Manhattan, where there was an awful lot of this How Dry I Am on the stoops there around 68th and 1st. And but anyway, to be a little cooler than Little Brown Jug and all that, we just go ahead and play the open E. That's a little more modern than a How Dry I Am. So a real turnaround might be, and then instead of going, which would be really suburban, you go, and then maybe chromatically just come in one note higher, make it a 7th. So that's a good thing right there. One of the big things about the E form is this playing melodies on the B string while pedal toning, or even with a double strike pedal toning on the high E ringing out. And then, of course, there is this form, which is going to the bass note here on the 7th fret on the A string, the 9th fret on the G string, mute the D, let the others ring out. But anyway, let's get back to the fun stuff, the drunken music. So, for a beginner and even into advanced, this 7 sharp 9, and then getting back from this E to the lowest note on the guitar is big, big, big stuff. All right, well, we'll continue with this E form tomorrow, but there's something I want to go over first, and that is this concept of getting from this E here down to this E. Now, all the notes are fair game, and the faster you play, the more dissonance or the more not very harmonious notes can be fit in there. So feel free when working your way down to have a lot of fun with it and add a little fifth on top. So if you're here, let's say I don't even know what I'm doing here.